Fellow Ghanaians, good morning. Last week, President John Dramani Mahama, in some remarks delivered far from home in Singapore, made what should have been an unremarkable statement. He said he will not contest the 2028 election and that he will respect the constitutional limit of 2 terms imposed on every Ghanaian president. It was not groundbreaking. It was not extraordinary. It was the most ordinary reaffirmation of a constitutional truth that every Ghanaian knows, one we have adhered to since 1993, that no president, not John Dramani Mahama, not anyone, can serve more than 2 terms in our republic. And yet this ordinary statement was necessary. It was necessary because for months, propaganda had been spun by some persons in the opposition, some no less figures than leading persons within the NPP. The minority leader, Afenyo-Markin, had claimed that John Dramani Mahama's every move was part of a grand scheme to seek an illegal 3rd term. When the president nominated 7 judges to the Supreme Court, Afenyo-Markin again declared that it was, quote, the first major attempt at the 3rd term agenda, unquote. When the president, acting within the confines of Article 146 of the Constitution, referred petitions from some citizens for the removal of the Chief Justice, the same voices chorused that this too was about laying the groundwork for a 3rd term. At rallies, press conferences, and in statements, this same chorus was sung that John Mahama was plotting to stay beyond his mandate. And so, fellow Ghanaians, when the president had the opportunity, he cut through the fog with one cryptic but decisive remark. He said since he was not running again in 2028, he will ensure fiscal discipline in the run-up to the election of 2028. That statement at once a rebuke to the rumor mongers and a reassurance to the nation. There was no clandestine agenda, no constitutional vandalism, no Mahama Forever project. But how did the opposition react? The very people who had for months insisted that the John Dramani Mahama and his party was plotting to stay for more now turn around and said that this statement is unnecessary because it couldn't have run anyway. They mocked what they had demanded. They ridiculed what they had feared. This is the hypocrisy that continues to poison our everyday politics. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. If they knew, as they now loudly proclaim, that the Constitution forbids a 3rd term, why then did they go around frightening the public with the talk of Mahama scheming for one? If they truly believe the 2-term cap is ironclad, why the paranoia? Why the accusations? Why the fear-mongering? The truth is, the narrative was never about law. It was about politics. It was about painting the president, John Dramani Mahama, as a power-hungry man, as a man plotting to stay on at all costs. And when the president himself made that clear that he had no such intention, he had no choice but now to shift the goalpost. Fellow Ghanaians, this announcement by John Mahama matters because though ordinary in a constitutional democracy, it is not ordinary in Africa. On this continent, term limits have been broken, bent and bulldozed by leaders intoxicated by the trappings of power. Across the continent, leaders have treated constitutions not as guardrails, but inconveniences to be revised when it suits them. Look no further than Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, our neighbor. President Alassane Ouattara once promised to step aside after his 2nd term. But in 2020, after the sudden death of his chosen successor, he reversed course and ran again, insisting the adoption of a new constitution had reset the clock. He won a controversial 3rd term that sparked protest and violence with dozens killed. The message was clear, even though the constitutional provisions can be twisted by some of these persons. Now he's running for another term. Consider Guinea, where Alpha Condé, once hailed as a Democrat, changed the constitution in 2020 to extend his stay in power. He argued that a new constitution meant his previous terms did not count, and so he ran again and won in a disputed poll marred by bloodshed. Less than a year later, he was overthrown by the military. His manipulation of the law had not only eroded his legitimacy, but destabilized the entire country. Then look to Uganda, where Yoweri Museveni has been in power since 1986. Over the years, he has systemically dismantled every constitutional barrier to his rule, first removing term limits in 2005 and later the age limit in 2017. That has paved way for him to rule almost indefinitely. A generation of Ugandans has never known another leader. Or Cameroon, where Paul Biya has been in power since 1982 and removed term limits in 2008 and continues to rule into his 90s, presiding over a country marred in conflict and stagnation. These are not distant stories. They are part of our region, our continent. They are proof that their temptation to cling to power is ever present, and that once term limits, considered sacrosanct, they are very fragile. That is why President Mahama's statement matters. It is not that the Constitution allows him to run again. It does not, and I'm sure he knows that. It is that he has publicly committed himself to honoring the constitutional limits, reaffirming that Ghana is not Guinea, not Cote d'Ivoire, and not Uganda. Fellow Ghanaians, we must also call out the hypocrisy of those who found rumors of constitutional vandalism when none exist. But we must also recognize the importance of leadership that reaffirms the very basics. Ghana's constitution is clear: 2 terms, no more. But in a continent where constitutions are often twisted, clarity is never wasted. Reassurance is never unnecessary. Let us also remember that Ghana has used these constitutional provisions before. President Jerry John Rawlings, after serving 2 terms, did not seek a third. President John Ejekum Kufuor, after 2 terms, handed over power. President John Evans Atta-Mills did not even live to finish his first term. But his successor, John Mahama, after serving 1 full term, lost and left. Nana Akufo-Addo, after 2 terms, again handed over. Our record is not perfect, but it's one of respect for term limits. That record must be preserved. Fellow Ghanaians, the question we must ask is not whether John Mahama will run again. He cannot, and he will dare not. The question is whether we as a people will guard the sanctity of our Constitution against those who, for short-term political gain, seek to undermine faith in it. And politicians casually claim that judges are being appointed to facilitate a 3rd term that cannot exist, they are not only misleading the public, they are undermining confidence in our democratic system. They are sowing distrust in the judiciary, in the presidency, in all of our institutions, and in the Constitution itself. And this matters because when citizens stop believing in the constitutional order, when they think every move is part of some sinister plot, they open the door for the very instability we see in other parts of Africa. Democracy dies not only when constitutions are broken, but also when citizens lose faith in them. Let us be very clear. The idea that nominating judges to the Supreme Court is evidence of a 3rd term plot is absurd. Every president has exercised that power. Rawlings did, Kufuor did, Mills did, Akufo-Addo did, and in fact, he nominated more than a dozen justices during his tenure. It is part of the constitutional design. To now suggest that John Mahama, in exercising that same prerogative, is plotting to stay in power may be hypocrisy of the highest order. And when petitions are filed by citizens under Article 146 and the constitutional machinery is triggered for the possible removal of a Chief Justice, that too is not new. We recall Loretta Lamte of Shraj, Charlotte Osei, they were all removed through the same process. Several High Court judges exposed in the announced bribery scandal were removed through that same process. And again, like I told you, former Electoral Commissioner Charlotte Osei went through the same process. Why then is it that the same process is now being applied today? Do we hear cries of a 3rd term agenda? The hypocrisy is not only galling, it's corrosive. Fellow Ghanaians, let us rise above this. Let us hold our leaders accountable, not with lies and paranoia, but with truth and principle. Let us demand fiscal discipline, job creation, infrastructure, healthcare, education, not phantom conspiracies. Let us focus on the substance of governance, not the shadows of propaganda. Because here's the hard truth. While we waste time debating phantom 3rd terms, the people are suffering. Youth unemployment is rising, roads are crumbling, hospitals lack beds, schools lack resources, corruption drains billions, and families cannot make ends meet. And instead of offering solutions, our politics is consumed by invented conspiracies. That is a betrayal of the people. Fellow Ghanaians, John Mahama has spoken, and we hope he means his words, that he will not run again, because the Constitution forbids that, and we will not accept it, even if he dared attempted that. That is the end of the matter. Those who insist otherwise are not defending the Constitution. They are defaming it. They are not protecting democracy. They are eroding trust of Africa and everyone that believes that Ghana is a democratic beacon. But they also remind us of the importance of citizens who guard their constitutions. In Ghana, that responsibility falls on all of us, you and I, not just the president, not just the court, not just parliament, but every citizen. So let us reject the hypocrisy, let us reject the paranoia, let us affirm the truth, 2 terms and no more. Let us turn our energy to real battles, the battles for jobs, for justice, for development, and for dignity. That is the work ahead, and that is the promise of our Constitution. That is the covenant of our republic. Good morning, fellow Ghanaians.